astrology. Sir Jeffy is an expert astrologer.
Thank you for calling me an expert.
You're
I
welcome.
guess I consider being an expert at this point.
I refer to him for all my astrological questions, and I would like to get on record some thoughts from Sir Jeffy regarding astrology in general and how Sir Jeffy uses astrology in his life and why it's important to him.
Great. Well, first I'll start off just sort of historically. I first got into astrology because I started being very interested in what makes people who they are, and I wanted to understand more. I was driven to understand. And when I was 15, 16 years old, someone gave me a Sagittarius book and said, look up all this stuff. And that just became a gateway for me to start looking up more people and read what's in the book and then compare to what I see and then just duplicate over and over and over again until you start to notice certain patterns and certain understandings and certain connections. That drove me, and I continued to do that and drew me into psychology, where I met, Drogo at Roger Williams University. And I met my second astrological mentor in a gentleman named Richard Faugier, who I give a lot of props to, a tremendously energetic and great teacher who taught me a whole bunch of new skills that, pushed me into the next level of learning and understanding.
And you knew him personally?
I know him personally, and we've known each other for, as long as I've been in college, so for over 20 years. From there, it's a mix of studying psychology and people and then comparing to what comes up with astrology. So one of the main things I use astrology for, and different astrologers, there's a million different ways you can go with it. The primary thing that I use astrology for is to understand other people and understand how my energies connect with somebody else's, and understand the areas of conflict and the areas of harmony, and hopefully to adjust how I'm working my way through the universe so that we can get to a better working relationship or harmony. The second part that I use it for is astrology is a very good way to kind of map out time and cycles, ups and downs and things. When you say, is this a good time for that? How do you know it's a good time for that? Astrology seems to be a map to, give you some sort of indication, what is good timing for this. A great example is the timing of right now. It's May 3rd, 2015, full moon, and I planned this trip specifically around this particular time period. On May 18th, we have Mercury retrograde happening for 3 weeks, and once you usually plan trips during Mercury retrograde, there tend to be delays and miscommunications, and things come up to delay your travel plans and whatnot. It was much better for me to take a vacation now to go traveling and see the world and get out there than doing it during Mercury retrograde over a Memorial Day weekend. That's just one example of how I use astrology to weave my way through time and have some sort of understanding of how to plan things. And I've known over my 20 plus years of using astrology that it's been effective, it's been valuable, it's been enlightening to a certain extent. And there are times when I say, I'm just going to ignore it and do stuff. It still happens. It still, surprises me. So to me, it's experiential, evidence-based understanding compared with, the astrological charts that I check on a daily basis. And thankfully, with modern technology, you can do charts in an instant on a smartphone, and that just helps tremendously.
Well, let's go on.
Let me talk about kind of a couple of types of astrology for people who maybe this is kind of like an astrology 101 thing. First of all, natal charts, where you can do for when your birth information is. That will give you a basic imprint of what energies you have here moving forward. analyzing transits would be another particular point, that you're looking at how different cycles are happening and when certain transits are set to happen with you. Maybe understanding some upcoming trends so you can plan for them. That's another brand. I particularly do this branch of astrology that not a lot of other astrologers do, but I do, called astrocartography. What that is taking your chart, putting it on a map, so that you can understand if you want to move to another location or take a vacation to another location, what sort of aspects will become more important when you particularly go to that location. So if I wanted to, take a trip to Costa Rica, different aspects would come up than in Rhode Island, where I live, and that sort of thing. You can also do it for all sorts of public figures and public, all sorts of, people out in the world, and understand, historically, that where they've traveled and what sort of influences have changed, and give you another dimension to, like, history. There's also another astrology where that I'm less familiar with, called horary astrology, where if someone asks me a question, I do a chart for that particular moment, and I can discern the answer to that question and get down to, something like, should I buy a car? And then I do a chart for that moment, and I can derive, like, whether that's a good decision or not. That I'm not as familiar with, but I knew that particular exists.
Do you feel that the planets... Do you believe there's a higher power affecting the readings?
No, not necessarily.
Planetary?
When you're saying higher power, like...
Planetary, universal, like planetary, whatever.
What I do propose is that there's some sort of mathematical order to the universe at some level that we don't understand fully yet. And astrology seems to be a map, or it seems to correlate to a lot of this stuff in that...
So are the planetary bodies affecting our lives and interpreted through these readings? Is that what's going on?
The planetary bodies influence us, yeah, certainly. How the mechanism for which that works scientifically, I'm unclear about. A lot of it, I would say, instead of applying... See, and this is hard for me because I'm a science-based person, yet I'm working with astrology, which is it's like mathematical in kind of pseudo-scientific in nature, but a lot of the tests scientifically don't hold up, so it's kind of invalidated quite a bit. But then there are other things where, the planets and solar systems and things above in the sky, rotate around, from, as big and as large as galaxies and the Milky Way and different solar systems, but even breaking down to even the micro level about atoms and electrons and neutrons, spin around each other and influence things. You start to think that, planetary bodies radiating light and energy somehow influence us here in some sort of way. I vaguely, like, if you want to get into how do you prove astrology, I would...
Is it mystical? Is astrology mystical?
What do you mean by mystical?
Do you have a definition of what mystical is? Personally? Do you personally call it mysticism? Is it a type of mysticism to you?
Mysticism, like, it's a mystery, it's unknowable, we're not really sure.
Yeah, I think
this is the best we know.
Definitions.
I guess I approach it that way in terms of this is what we know. I think, like, where I would take it is symbolic value. There could be a case made for, like, light, like the light of the planets, affect us in some way. But I know there's probably an astrophysics kind of guy who would, like, disprove that sort of theory. There's another thought too, like, what if you were born in space? Then how would you do a chart? And I have no idea how that would work. It would probably require some really complex mathematics. Part of my trouble with some of these questions about proving or whatever is that I'm a psychology guy. I'm not like a astrophysics mathematical guy, so I just don't have the capability of that. I just use it as a framework to understand people from kind of like a symbolic, mythical, I guess, point of view. And that's, I guess, as close as I could come. Obviously, if I can gather more evidence, or if I had time to network with the top astrologers and hear what they're saying about answering that question, it would, evolve my view on it.
Okay, let's talk about your general theory of psychology. And what are the could you explain to the layperson?
My general theory of psychology.
Yeah, what are the types of psychology and your training? And
this is a very big question, but for me, I have a master's degree in rehab counseling and been in all sorts of human service elements all throughout my life. And, study and get really into, even in college, theories of personality are really interest to me. My predominant mode that I default to, which I think is not popular here in the United States or around, is a sort of a mix between an existential Gestalt mode. So, and I apply that to astrology as well, where the focus is on the encounter between the one person and another, and we deal with things in the here and now, and how that's influencing you, and how you're feeling now. Talking about, sitting like in Freudian psychology, sitting on a couch and free associating until the psychoanalyst figures out what's wrong with you is ineffective. The most popular part of psychology right now is cognitive behavioral psychology, which has to do with the cognitive part, how you're thinking, what you're saying, what statements you're saying to yourself, and changing how you're thinking so that your belief system will change. And then the behavioral aspect of it. You're behaving a certain way. What can you do to change your behavior that will then get you to where you want to go?
And Gestalt. What is Gestalt?
Let me get to Gestalt in a minute. Cognitive behavioral is popular because it's insurance billable. It's very easy to document. Person thinks this, I did intervene this, now they think that. Or this is the behavior that's going on, we did this change, and now this behavior occurs. And insurance companies like that mathematical thinking, so it just kind of like works, A lot harder with existential Gestalt because it's unique, it's encounter driven, it's like, bringing things to the surface that work about. I was when I was speaking before to Drogo about what is Gestalt, and I had suggested to resolve some of Drogo's daddy issues, and I said, just imagine your dad right next to you, start talking to him, tell him how you feel right now. And if he were to do that, and as he would start doing that, we would have a direct experience of his encounter with his father to go over all of his daddy issues. And we would both together see what comes up and talk about it. And then that conversation might bring us into all sorts of different areas.
So it's more mutual than the original Freudian, let me tell you what your problem is.
Right. The Freudian psychology we'll get into, the counselor will be the expert and the client is sort of, or the analyst has all the answers and the client doesn't. And I'm oversimplifying a bit. The neo-Freudians probably have gotten ahead of that or gotten beyond that.
Fair enough.
But if you go see a psychoanalyst, they're going to start by delving into your past. And one of the differences that existential / Gestalt will do, we'll talk with the present. Let's deal with what's going on, what's important for you right now. And let's start with that. Personal history is important to gain kind of an understanding of the landscape, but we're not going to keep talking about, well, how's your father doing? Or what's your, delving into the past and different things like that. We're going to deal with, what's the presenting problem and go forth from that, and then try to, work with it to change it and to see. Also, Gestalt deals a lot with like what's happening in your body. every time I have an argument with my wife, my neck hurts. So the therapist might say, well, if the pain in your neck would be able to speak, what would it be saying? And do some interesting things and direct role plays about that, and you get to some pretty unique places through direct experience, rather than doing some other other things, or talking about your behaviors, which is sort of separate than you. There's a family psych direction going to. I'm of the mindset of a guy named Carl Whitaker, who his theory of family psychology is that there is no theory of psychology for families, and that mostly it's you gotta you're working with a family to sort of get them to relate better, and either turning the anxiety up or turning it down, and having this very unique phenomenal approach that kind of matches my Gestalt existentialism. But you're looking at the family as a system that, Drogo, you're not the problem in your family. It's your family system. I can't just treat you. I have to treat you, your mother, your brother, your sister, your father, whoever. All of you has to come here, or it has to be represented for you to be fixed. There are no scapegoats. And I think that kind of works, because I feel like a direct approach is, with the focus on the phenomenological, this is what I'm experiencing in the world. It's very direct, and it's very, very present, and you don't waste time. You get right to it, and I like that. I use that a lot in my profession when I'm meeting with clients, trying to get an understanding of what's most important right now. And then we have to go through a lot of the structural, bureaucratical stuff that I have to do in order to move things forward. But I'm fairly open-minded with a lot of that stuff, and sometimes I go into a meeting without any sort of preconceived plan, and we just go. I go with what the encounter generates.
Fair enough. Okay.